If you want to make the step from a recreational triathlete age group to a more pro level, I think the first thing to consider is the swimming. And swimming is something which is much more difficult to learn at older age than at young age. That's why most of the professional triathletes, they have a long swimming history from the young age. If you are a good swimmer, then everybody can learn to bike and to run. And then the first thing to accomplish is to learn your body to cope with the high training volume. If you must push 200 watts on your bike for 6 hours, you first have to learn to ride your bike for 6 hours and then progressively develop from, let's say, 150 watts to 170, 180, 190, 200 until you are able to push the power output for 6 hours. In running it's the same. You have to learn to run for 3-4 hours before you are able to complete a marathon in the context of a full triathlon. So the first thing to do is to learn to cope with the volumes before you increase the intensity. When you start to work on bridging the gap between age group and a pro, you have to consider some medical aspects, and a good thing to do is to submit yourself to a medical screening. So a good sports physician tells you if it's really a good idea to train for a full triathlon. And maybe for some of us, the quarter triathlon is an endpoint. For some others, it's a half triathlon, because your body is just not made to cope with higher training volumes and intensities, and you would just develop disease and injuries by doing more. Then the second thing to do is you could just train on your feeling and increase your training volumes, but you could also try to put some more structure in your training, for instance by undergoing an exercise test. And one of the things to determine in an exercise test is what we would call the fat max or the fat threshold. And that's the highest exercise intensity one can effect by using mainly fat as an energy substrate in the muscle. And this corresponds well to the highest speed in cycling and the highest speed in running you can just do by continuing a conversation with a partner. If you go a little bit faster, you get immediately breathless. And if you know the heart rate and the power outputs for cycling, or the heart rate and the speed for running that correspond to the fat max, you can train specifically on these exercise intensities and make more progress with less training, which is ideal to prevent injury. Yeah, I think it's a fact that if you want to develop as a recreational quarter triathlete age group to eventually doing a full triathlon, you will need to spend an enormous amount of time. Because conceivably the cycling at the start of your full triathlon career will take, let's say, 6 hours, and the marathon will take maybe 4 hours, and you first have to learn to cope with the volumes. So if you don't have the time to spend, let's say, 2 times cycling between 5 and 6, maybe 7 hours per week, and doing your 2 times 20 kilometers per week running, which has also an enormous social impact on the rest of your life, it probably makes no sense to live with the idea to go for a full triathlon, because you simply don't have the time or the sufficient time to make sufficient training volumes.